this was the important catch, and I think Bob and I agreed strongly on this. We wanted to bring in people who would be able to communicate to a broader audience about the profundity of their own experiences of various kinds in music. And it seems like George Lynn is the focus of this event, and we're soon going to hear from Eph Ehly, in a sense, is a really wonderful embodiment of this principle. So again, we have a biography that you can read about preliminaries for Dr. Eph Ehly, but he is the sort of designated person. We are very, very pleased and privileged to have as our seventh Robert and Ruth Fink lecturer, Dr. Eph Ehly. And as we've heard many times now, obviously the inheritor and the progenitor of the George Lynn legacy is seeking the extra in the ordinary. And I'm going to leave that to him to explain exactly what he's getting at. Thank you. So, Professor Eph Ehly.
I have not had the experiences, great experience of singing Westminster Choir College, like Larry, and you working with him since high school. Gosh, I don't know why I am here, but you heard so many wonderful things about George Lynn and heard his music, and I suppose you expect me to say nice things about George. What if I was perfectly honest? Would you still believe me? I've decided I'm going to be perfectly honest because I want you to believe me. George Lynn was not the only influential person in my life. I had many, some prominent musicians. Julius Herford was mentioned, and Vincent Persichetti, Jean Berger, some great professors here at CU. Cecil Effinger, Bill Clendenin, Storm Bull, Bill Kearns. Warner Heimlich was a father to me. He really took me under his wing. And Lynn Whitten was like a brother to me. I had others. My grandmother, my Uncle Harry, but I'm not going to go on. George Lynn was not the only influential person in my life, but next to my papa, Theodore Ehly, George Lynn was the single most influential person in my life. Seriously. He made me feel like I was somebody when I felt like I was nobody. We talk about our experience. I can only talk about my own experience because it's the only experience I've had. But I was born the middle child, family of 13 children, in the middle of the Depression, in the middle of Nebraska, which is the middle of the United States, on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Strapping, strong farm kid I was not. As a matter of fact, they said I was so skinny my eyes were single file. So between them and your belly button, you look like a white clarinet. But after my high school graduation, the summer after my high school graduation, I burned my dad's John Deere tractor accidentally. I wrecked the family Chevy pickup accidentally. Planted the corn so crooked they couldn't find the rows, and Papa decided maybe this one could do something else. A miracle took place. For me, it was a miracle. I was permitted, I was allowed to go to college. I was the first one among all my relatives. German farmers were supposed to stay home, where I was permitted to go to college. So after I graduated, before Papa died, last few years, every time I'd come home, he'd say, "Now, son, tell me exactly what is it that you do again?" And so one time I did Nebraska All-State, 30 miles from home. Papa never traveled more than 30 miles. And Papa came, watched rehearsal all afternoon, watched the performance. You know what happens after the performance. Everybody's high-fiving, hugging each other, celebrating like crazy. Papa's there. I said, "Now, Papa, now you see what I do. This is what I do every day of my life. Go around and make people sing." He said, "And they pay you for that? Yeah, they pay me for that. And you and I are the beneficiaries of those patriot dreams that Catherine Lee Bates talks about in that great song. I think she was standing down here about where the Air Force Academy entrance is when she wrote, "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies." I love the second verse. "Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years." We should be so fortunate to have politicians that can see beyond the next election, right? But we did. We had patriots who could see beyond the years. And patriots like John Adams, Hamilton, Jefferson, Franklin. And they had this dream. Wouldn't it be nice if every kid in America would get a free public education? Wow, stunning. Change the world. John Adams said, "My generation must study war and revolution so that my children have the opportunity to study industry and commerce, so that my grandchildren have the opportunity to study art and music." You and I are the beneficiaries of those great patriotic dreams. Patriot dreams, yeah. My start was teaching at a small school in Panhandle, Nebraska. My memory of my undergraduate was just a series of parties. And all of a sudden, I got a job, and I got in there, and I didn't know what to do. And so my mentor at the time said, "There's a man out there in Golden, Colorado by the name of George Lynn. I think you should study with him." Made contact with him, and he said yes. He accepted me. So I drove from Scottsbluff, Nebraska to Denver, 3-hour drive, every Saturday, every other week for I don't know how many years. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my association with this George Lynn. We both knew that I would not become a prize singer. That was not going to be my purpose. That was not his purpose. But he would work with me through singing. And thus began our journey. An education that was transformed my thought. And you know, as a man thinks, so he becomes. And that gave birth to the philosophy of stop teaching music to people and start teaching people through music. Dr. Lynn, big man, especially to me, skinny kid I was, big deep voice, scared me lots of times. But you see, after every one of those sessions with him, I felt taller, I felt stronger, I felt wiser, I felt more confident. And then I'd run back to my school, and I noticed the students would sit up and take notice. They began to listen. And I began to buy in to George's philosophy. And they began to buy into my philosophy. And George Lynn was beginning to have an impact on my students through me. Wow. I say beginning because, you see, his philosophies were changing me, little by little. When I'd miss a lesson or more, you know, like sometimes the weather would be bad, Christmas break or something like that, I stopped growing. One year I was extremely exhausted. I mentioned that yesterday. At the end of the year, I decided I'm not going to teach anymore. I mean, I'd been teaching 6 years, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I was exhausted, and then when Dr. Lynn found out, I wanted to know what was going on, and I said, "I am burned out." And he said, "Young man, don't you ever say you're burned out. People who say they're burned out have never been on fire in the first place." He said, "You can be burned up, but not burned out." Yeah. Then he said these 4 words. See, I repeat myself. I'm sorry, you guys, but you know, it's the same old stories. 4 words. I'll never forget. Do yourself this favor. If he would have said, you know what you need to do, you can't do that, I wouldn't have listened, but he said, do yourself this favor. Come to DU this summer and study with a master himself, John Finney Williamson. And he said, if you're not inspired, you're doing the right thing. So I discussed it with my wife, and that kept playing on my mind. Do yourself. Yeah, maybe I should do myself this favor before I give up on this profession I'd been working on. And I came to Denver, John Finney Williamson, and that definitely changed my life. Easy to say it changed my life, but it did. I had copious notes. I had copious notes from those, I think there were 3 weeks and a workshop. I had copious notes of all my years with George, all the precious things that he would say. But I had a fire just 3 years ago and lost everything. And so I'm just kind of trying to think back and recall some things. And fortunately, one of my students, John Beeler, did a dissertation, thank you, you referred to, and did a wonderful job of retelling some of George Lynn's stories. But he didn't really get into the music. And I now have a graduate student in Nebraska that's interested in investigating George Lynn's music. So I hope that will happen. But one of the things that stuck in my mind was Williamson was look for what's not in the score. Wow, it changed everything. Because up until that time, it was all about the score. That's what we were taught. And that's a philosophy that was taught in education throughout America. Everything was the score. George would take a piece of music, let up and say, that's not music. It's expensive, but it's not the music. This is just a map. Yeah, that made a huge difference. Stop teaching music to people. Start teaching people through music. That's what he was doing to me, changing me philosophically. George was philosophical about everything, I thought. He didn't engage in common, useless, idle talk. I know, I think you quoted him, I think, that dissertation, but I remember I would come in. I was a young teacher, you know, and I'd have my problems. And I didn't know who to discuss it with. So you go to your teacher. So I'd come in and I'd want to tell him something about this student or that student or some of my problems. And I remember he said, the great ones, meaning teachers, the great ones walk into any town, find what the people's aesthetic capacities are, and make something special of them. Well, you also mentioned about the uncommon qualities, draw out uncommon qualities out of common people. I was common people. My students I worked with were common people. We could do uncommon things. I remember another time when I was wrought up about something. And thanks for having this, because this centennial has allowed me and forced me to think back and recall some of these delicious things he had to say. And I was wrought up about something, and he said, why don't you stamp out your anxiety and supplant it with firmness? Wow, I like that. He seemed to be philosophical about everything, anything, whether it was his son's wrestling or government's ineptitude or the sugar beet fields in Scotts Bluff or Mozart sonatas. He offered an observation that was loftier than anything my imagination was ever capable of. I remember he said, you think sophistication has greatness. It's not, it's froth. And yet to me, George Lynn was the epitome until he came to visit me in Scottsbluff. Or we had him up for a festival or something. So he came to the house, you know, and we were with the kids and we were talking, and I was saying something like, you shake Dr. Lynn's hands or something, and all of a sudden he said, very authoritative, will you stop with the Dr. Lynn business and call me Uncle George? That was the beginning of a new relationship. Yeah, that was different. From then on, I sensed that he sensed he had a real convert in me. From then on, it was more like man to man. I was no longer afraid of him. He could scold me, he did. He could cajole me. But I knew he cared for me. I knew he had an interest in me. He became a friend, a dear friend, one I deeply respected. And I always made the relationship between him and my papa, because my papa was kind of philosophical, not educated, but philosophical. And when as a kid, every time I'd ask him something, he would always say, now son, if I tell you, I will have to repeat it tomorrow because you'll forget. But if you tell me, you will remember for life. And George was like that. He said, he tells a story about his father always said, don't ask people to do something you won't do yourself. Something along that line. Yeah. I began to see the personality in his music. You know, it takes a long time. He loved Schutz, which you mentioned. He loved Heinrich Schutz. I've never even heard of that composer. And he said that influenced his composition even more than Harris or Thompson. And yeah, I think that, I can't tell you directly that he spoke to me so much about Schutz, but it definitely inspired me. And Schutz started to become one of my favorite composers. I can't help but last night I heard like the density of Schutz, the power of Schutz in all of that music. It's just amazing, and especially in the choral music now. And you'll hear it tomorrow night. It's funny too, I'd walk into a rehearsal when I got home, I'd imagine myself as George Lynn. I'd imagine myself the size of Jeffrey there. You know, I'd walk in, pretend like I weighed 200 pounds, and I'd sit at my stool, take off my glasses, and speak in a low voice as I possibly could, which I didn't have. I only realized, but the students listened, you know. It was effective, and I had to finally give that up sometime. I don't know what crazy things I remember. I mean, because I don't have any consistent notes, you know. But I remember we were talking about instruments one time. He said saxophone, something about saxophones. He said saxophones remind me of plumbing. Just crazy things like that. I remember, you know, it doesn't seem to fit into my speech or anything, but yeah. So anyway, I remember he said, oh yeah, and so I was thinking, what are my memories? Just as you all were talking about these things, I think, yeah, every time I came to a lesson, he'd be waiting for me. He'd be sitting in a chair, leg crossed, with a book. Always a book. And I would come in, and it was never, hey, hi, how was the trip? You know, how were the roads? You know, it was never anything like that. First words were, Schweitzer. Was not a great doctor, was not a great theologian, was not a great organist, was not a great philosopher, but he was all of these. And now I'm kidding. Think about that quote and I'm thinking, George was a great composer. George was a great organist. George was a great conductor and teacher. George was a great philosopher. Yeah. And he said, Williamson never cracked a psychology book, but he could have held a chair in clinical psychology at any university. And then, of course, you mentioned Doug Hammarskjöld. I remember those times when he was obsessed with the markings. And he said, Doug Hammarskjöld, he said, be grateful as your deeds are less and less associated with your name. So live then, that you may use what has been put into your hand. And text was so important to him. And he said, it's not what the composer did with the text, it's what he had to do with the text. And then there were these little poems, that I picked up, and I can't tell exactly when or where they were not. And one of my favorites was, how many of us ever stopped to think of music as a magic link with God? It knows no race, color, nor creed, but gives according to his need. Sometimes even takes the place of prayer when words fail beneath the weight of care. Just those many gems, as you so eloquently pointed out, Greg, statement. You have to stop and think, and then it makes a profound difference in life. Those are my memories of Uncle George. Yeah. So, in summation, to me, George was larger than life, as I could imagine it. He spoke of working, you mentioned all these orchestras, and all these great conductors. And in spite of all that greatness, he never lost sight of his roots. He loved to talk about that. And whatever he did, he said his father would say, you'll do better. And he did that to me all the time. I'd come and I'd say, I just didn't have enough time to practice, Just remind me, we go through it, and then my apology. You'll do better. Next time, you'll do better. Well, I really want to thank all you people that brought me here. First of all, thank you, Tina, for being a daughter. Loves her dad so much. And you're willing to go through all this work. And Tom, Reese, and Eric, and Stacy, do all this work. And Bob, and Ruth, for your financial support, bringing me here. And Greg, my prize student, and Andrea, my prize student. Thanks for letting me be sentimental and reminisce. Greatest poem I learned from either he or Williamson, whoever, kind of tells what this is all about. Anonymous. For the common things of every day, God gave men speech in a common way. But for the deeper things men think and feel, he gave the poet words to reveal. But for the heights and depths that know no reach, God gave man music, the soul's own speech. Thanks for having me.
If there are any remaining questions of either a logistical or a philosophical nature or musical nature, I'd be happy to take them. Yes, Dr. Gentry, Senior.
One of the greatest compliments that I had in my practice was when George walked into my office. And he was a patient, not George, so he would listen to what I had to say. It was a great compliment.
And how many glasses,
Oh yes, that was
prescriptions
his greatest thing to ask me. He says, why in the world don't you come up with a pair of glasses that I can see here, here, and there? I said, George, it's not possible.
Thank you, Dr. Gentry. I might add, by the way, this is just in the way of general information. I talked to several people last night who had driven in from quite a ways. You've come all the way from Raleigh, I believe, but we had at least one couple who drove from Golden. And I'll share this story because it's relevant to, I think, the general theme of the day. A couple, I believe his name was Farmer, and he came with his wife from Golden, and he said, I was a student at Mines, Colorado School of Mines, and we were in the community chorus, or the kind of town chorus that Dr. Lynn directed there. But for him, a geology student, petroleum engineer, I think, he said this was a peak experience when Dr. Lynn said, oh, well, of course you're going to join me in the Loretto College Choir in Denver for a performance. He's remembering this. He was older than I, so he's remembering this from quite a ways back. And I just thought that was so indicative. And I said, well, we're having this whole week of activities. And he said, wow, we wanted to hear about George Lynn's music. So that's why we came today. We could only come up to Boulder one time. And I thought that was a doubly fascinating thing, that he really wanted to hear more about George Lynn.
Tina, is the entire Tim link on YouTube yet, or
No.
do you have a plan to have that up in?
These are a series of interviews that were done for the radio, I believe,
Yes.
by Tim Lang, a local broadcaster. And
If you don't know, Tina has begun to place many things for George Lynn on the George Lynn YouTube channel. And there are snippets of his speaking, and he would wax philosophic, as you have learned today. And it's wonderful to hear his voice alone for all of us that were in the room with him, and then for the things he says. So
I saw two other hands that were here. Fred?
You're mentioning School of Mines reminded me that when Dr. Lynn came back to Colorado, he not only was spending the first summer teaching at University of Denver's guest, but conducted the All-State Choir, the Children's Choir Festival, the Summer Child's Camp at La Forêt, and also commuted every week to the University of Nebraska in Albuquerque as composer in residence. And then the following year, he made the decision to associate himself with Loretto Heights College and the Colorado School of Mines. But the reason he decided to associate with both of those schools was that there were all kinds of people flooding in from Princeton and elsewhere around the country to study with him, and he wanted to ensure that they had a chance to get a formal education as well as just studying with him. And he said, there are people that come to work with me who have an affinity for the liberal arts, and there are some that don't. And so I wanted to make sure that I was also affiliated with a school that would allow people who had abilities like Dr. Gentry in medicine and science and things, and so that's why he ended up at Mines as well.
That was really moving to me because Mr. Wallace told me last night, he said, it was the only music we had at Mines. So it was that much more important. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, very quickly, I'd like to share just a little bit of what Dr. Lynn was in my life because it's not musical. Like most of these people here, I did not end up as a professional musician, totally went another way. But first Lucille was my teacher and then Dr. Lynn. And I moved to Michigan, worked for a tiny company, and a new employee came in, and we were introduced as the two music people. And he asked me, who did you study with? And this is in Michigan. And I said, oh, I was at this tiny little college in Loretto, and my voice teacher was George Lynn. And he went, George Lynn? I went to Westminster Choir College for a little bit, and so he knew. And so we went out to dinner that night. His name was Steve Mackey. My name is Alenka Mackey now. And so we went to the last workshop, both Steve and I, we were not married then, at Ghost Ranch. The following year, we were married. Dr. Lynn was the organist at our wedding. And the following year, and this is one of my favorite memories of him, he threw me a singing baby shower. He arranged for his voice students, there were 16 students who participated. They each did one song, and then there was a reception, and and then they presented us with a gift. So as far as I know, he did not throw baby showers too often.
I can't think of a more wonderful place to stop. That's a terrific story. Thank you so much. And thank you all again for doing this.